Ah yes, the personal is political. It's an old adage, hailing from back during the genesis of second-wave feminism. The phrase first gained traction as the title of one of Carol Hannock's publications from 1969, where she exclaims that the problems women have aren't personal problems requiring therapy, but political problems requiring systemic change. But not only that, she also says personal problems are political problems. There are no personal solutions at this time. There is only collective action for a collective solution. I prefer to call even this aspect political therapy, as opposed to personal therapy. The most important is getting rid of self-blame. Can you imagine what would happen if women, blacks, and workers, my definition of worker is anyone who has to work for a living as opposed to those who don't, all women are workers, would stop blaming ourselves for our sad situations? It seems to me the whole country needs that kind of political therapy. In essence, Hannock attempted to put forward the idea that the issues of sex, appearance, abortion, childcare, and the division of household labor were not simply personal problems for individual women to solve to their own satisfaction, but political problems requiring collective action. Since then, the definition has expanded. Now, the personal is political means that a culture warrior has no personal private life. It's all activism. It's all political. That's why, for example, feminism isn't about personal choice, as the social justice warriors like to tell us. If you happen to be a naturally submissive woman living a traditional lifestyle, that's oppressive and patriarchal. Your personal desires, your choices don't matter, because what you do affects how other women are treated, as your private life diffuses in some small way into the larger culture. The personal is political. And because of that, the implication is, when there's a clash between the two, the political takes precedent over the personal. And then the definition expanded again. The new phrase I see being thrown around now is, everything is political. Not just the personal, but all areas of life, all of existence is political. Here, let's watch postmodernism instantly devour itself. The answer to the challenges of the new millennium is not more state intervention, but to eliminate politics in the state. The elimination of the state is the SJW wet dream, because the state is a structure, and all structures are, of course, inherently oppressive. That's why you have open border advocates claiming that citizenship is racism, and chanting "No USA" at all at their rallies. But here's the counterpoint, right out of the same philosophy. Eliminate politics, everything is political. Capitalism is a political choice by the rich, and it's a system of exploitation. That's postmodernism for you, simultaneously wishing for the destruction of the political while exclaiming that everything is political. These people want to wage war on being itself, much the same way that the most violent among us do every time they shoot up a mosque or drive a van into the kafir. Politics of attractiveness, pretty privilege. Yes, everything is political. You will be judged by every possible measurement, every metric of your life. I will throw a table at the next person who says, stop making everything political. Everything is political. Everything involves power. Everything involves people. Get used to it. Hey, do you want to break from the culture war? Want to get off Twitter, recharge your batteries, play a video game for fun? Well, fuck you. There's no break. There's no escape. Everything is political. You think you're just sitting there benignly playing Mario Brothers and unwinding? If Anita Sarkeesian has taught me anything, it's that
everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
No fun allowed, guys. Speaking of video games, the first time I personally heard the phrase, everything is political, was from the fat, soy-beard Jesse Cox stand-in game journalist character from Life is Strange 2.
I come from a family with money, but no soul. I took off after school and never looked back. Now I write stories for zines and websites, do podcasts, protest, try to make some positive change. Whatever.
Wow. So you're like all political.
Everything is political, Sean.
Yeah, this was another of the games that my friend and I laughed our asses off on my Twitch channel at. It was a hilariously bad shit show.
Maybe I should call ICE to make sure you're a citizen.
Fuck you, hillbilly. I'm American.
Shut up, thief.
Just let me go. Please.
You're the reason we need to build that wall.
But Life is Strange 2 got me thinking about it. The whole everything is political stuff. It's an idea I couldn't quite articulate. Maybe it was a little bit beyond me. But recently, my good pal V managed to put it together for me. By the way, I realized something. When the SJWs say everything is political, that's cultural fascism. It's similar to everything is within the state, nothing outside the state. Everything is political, nothing is non-political. What V's referring to is Mussolini's doctrine of fascism from 1932. Liberalism denied the state in the interests of the particular individual. Fascism reaffirms the state as the true reality of the individual. And if liberty is to be the attribute of the real man, and not of that abstract puppet envisaged by the individualistic liberalism, fascism is for liberty. And for the only liberty which can be a real thing, the liberty of the state, and of the individual within the state. Therefore, for the fascist, everything is in the state, and nothing human or spiritual exists, much less has value outside the state. In this sense, fascism is totalitarian, and the fascist state, the synthesis and unity of all values, interprets, develops, and gives strength to the whole life of the people. This same idea was more succinctly referred to in a speech Mussolini gave in 1926. Here I wish to reaffirm solemnly our doctrine of the state. Everything in the state, nothing against the state, nothing outside the state. And it's this quotation that V is referencing that ultimately became famous to describe totalitarian ideologies. That would be why they're totalitarian. They claim to contain the total sum of all things. Nothing outside the state, everything within the state. If cultural Marxism is the SJW attempt to utilize cultural pushback to address their perception of inequality by promoting political correctness and multiculturalism at the expense of individual liberty and free speech, similar to how regular Marxism uses economic pushback to achieve the same goals, then cultural fascism must be the SJW attempt to render all things within their domain, with nothing of value opposing it and nothing existing outside of it, similar to the fascist conception of the state. This is why V conceptualized the phrase everything is political as cultural fascism, but there are also other examples. Every single time a social justice warrior tells you snarkily, if you believe in the equality of women then you're a feminist and that's cultural fascism. It's taking all possible outcomes of the conversation into their domain and regulating it as such, making you either a rank-and-file soldier under their command or a demonized enemy. There's no middle ground. There's nothing outside of the political. Or when you see wildly different people reduced to simply being a Nazi because they're not radical lefties. That's cultural fascism at work. If nothing of value exists within their state, then everything opposing them must simply be a part of the same valueless blob they call Nazi. It's why the argument is commonly put forth that if you're against Nazis, you're Antifa. No nuances allowed. But the danger of cultural fascism extends beyond even this. It gets worse. The problem is, as humans, there's a gigantic gap between what we can articulate and what we know but can't quite say yet, and an even bigger gap between what we know and can't quite say and what we don't know at all. Long story short, it's impossible for us to know all things, let alone articulate them. For example, the law is our attempt to codify what we know, but the law is incomplete by design. I'm sure that's a politician's nightmare. I'm sure they'd love the law to be all-encompassing, but it can't and it never will be. That's why any expanding bureaucracy is ultimately totalitarian. The EU might have a semblance of democracy, but when they begin regulating the length of bananas or the size of light bulbs, the whole everything within the state, nothing outside of the state phrase comes to mind, doesn't it? But because law is necessarily incomplete, it has to rest on an indescribable foundation. In some sense, as unfinished of a line of thought as this is, the law has to be subordinate to the mediation between what we can articulate, what we know, and what we don't know. I think this is what people commonly describe as the spirit of the law, as opposed to the letter. These ideas aren't fully articulated. At least, not fully articulated by me, obviously. But I still think that if law doesn't aim at those things properly, it would have no moral force behind it. It would be like looking up words in a dictionary if you didn't understand the concept of words. Definitions refer to other definitions, but the words refer to something else, something not fully understood. And if those forces aren't in accordance, the whole thing collapses. This is the deepest problem with cultural fascism. Whether it's Richard Spencer dreaming of a white ethno-state, or Cher dreaming of male castration facilities, utopian ideologues completely dispense with the idea that something can only be partially known and not articulated, as a necessary precursor of building paradise. They say, this is what the law is, or this is what the words mean, or this is what we have to do. Nothing outside of this, nothing opposing this. And in failing to leave space for what they only kind of know and what they don't know at all, their totalitarian structures become ever-expanding, unwieldy, inefficient, and toxic to human life. And when things get that big, when bureaucracy becomes indistinguishable from reality, when everything is political, fractures begin to appear. Groups break off. Interests become entrenched. Purity spirals begin. And inevitably, the whole thing collapses under the hubris of its creators, who had the audacity to exclaim that the sum total of human existence could be encapsulated within their shitty ideology. I think I'm proving my own point here in a weird way. This is an idea I couldn't even begin to articulate until V coined the term cultural fascism, and I still feel like I'm not even close to the mark yet. But maybe it's something like this. If anybody says to you everything is political, their worldview is a totalitarian one. They don't know what it actually means for all things to be political, because they're too arrogant to understand just how important the interplay between the known and the unknown truly is.